In the sprawling campus of Westridge University, nestled amidst ivy-covered buildings and well-manicured lawns, a small lecture hall buzzed with subdued anticipation. Professor Arthur Dayton stood at the front, his tailored suit and slicked-back hair giving him the air of a man who thought himself indispensable. His voice cut through the murmurs as he barked instructions to the students, his tone as sharp as the creases in his trousers. "This is the future of astrophysics," he declared, pacing like a predator. "You, each of you, represent the next generation of scientific minds, but only if you can prove yourselves worthy." Arthur thrived on authority, wielding it with the precision of a scalpel. For 15 years, he had clawed his way to prominence, awaiting the moment he could ascend to the head of the astrophysics faculty. And tomorrow, with the teaching committee's arrival, he intended to seal his legacy. Nothing and no one would stand in his way. But something had already slipped into his perfect plan. A quiet figure sitting at the back of the classroom, hardly noticeable among the sea of eager faces. The exchange student had arrived just days earlier. A young man with dark, unassuming eyes. His name was Amir. He rarely spoke, his silence a source of scorn for Arthur. As Arthur lectured, his eyes occasionally darted to Amir. The boy's lack of fluency in English irritated him to no end. "Mr. Amir," he snapped suddenly, his voice laced with condescension, "what's the answer? Or are we wasting space on someone who doesn't even know the language?" Amir's lips moved, but the words didn't come fast enough. Arthur smirked, gesturing dismissively. "Figures. Astrophysics requires brilliance, not babbling. If you can't keep up, there's always dishwashing." The class chuckled nervously, but a few faces betrayed discomfort. One of them was Lucy Campbell, a senior who had grown weary of Arthur's antics. She shot Amir a sympathetic glance, but he didn't meet her gaze, his head bowed as he scribbled in his notebook. After class, Amir stayed behind. Gathering his courage, he approached Arthur's desk, a carefully folded piece of paper trembling in his hand. "What's this?" Arthur sneered, snatching the note. "A complaint? How quaint." He skimmed the paper, his disdain deepening. "Do you think anyone cares what you think? You don't even belong here. Exchange students like you, people like you, are why standards are slipping." Amir's face burned, but he didn't back down. "I just want to learn," he said softly, his words carefully measured. Arthur scoffed. "Learn? You? Maybe try the cafeteria. They're always hiring." He crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash. "Get out of my sight." Amir left in silence, his heart heavy but his resolve unbroken. As he walked back to his dorm, he thought of the sacrifices his family had made for him to be here, to chase a dream that now felt impossibly far away. His father had sold their only car. His mother had worked late into the night sewing garments. They believed in him, even if Arthur Dayton didn't. The next morning, the lecture hall was abuzz with whispers. The teaching committee had arrived, and with them, Dr. Samuel Reed, a prominent astrophysicist and one of the youngest minds to gain global recognition in the field. Arthur greeted the committee with the fervor of a man who could already taste victory. "Welcome," he said, his smile practiced and polished. "Allow me to introduce my brightest students. These are the minds that will shape the future, under my guidance, of course." The committee nodded politely, their attention soon drifting to the back of the room. Arthur followed their gaze and froze. Amir was standing there, his presence a stark reminder of the day's potential imperfection. "What are you doing here?" Arthur hissed under his breath, storming toward Amir. "I told you to stay out of sight." But before Arthur could usher him out, Dr. Reed spoke up. "Ah, there he is." Arthur blinked. "Excuse me?" Dr. Reed stepped forward, a warm smile on his face as he addressed Amir. "Mr. Amir, it's good to see you again. I believe you had a question about string theory?" Arthur's jaw slackened. "You know him?" Dr. Reed turned to the committee. "Not just know him. Amir here is a brilliant young man. His insights on quantum mechanics at last year's conference were groundbreaking. I've been looking forward to seeing him in action." The room fell silent. Arthur's face flushed as the weight of his mistake became apparent. Dr. Reed continued, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Dayton, this committee has been investigating complaints about your conduct. We've received numerous reports about your treatment of students, particularly those who don't fit your narrow definition of excellence. Today, we've seen enough to confirm those reports. Arthur stammered, desperation seeping into his voice. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't know. That's precisely the problem, Dr. Reed cut in. You didn't bother to know. A great educator inspires, uplifts, and respects their students. You, Mr. Dayton, have done the opposite. The committee conferred briefly before their leader, Mrs. Campbell, stepped forward. Effective immediately, Arthur Dayton, you are relieved of your duties. This university values integrity and equal opportunity, and your behavior has no place here. Arthur's protests fell on deaf ears as security escorted him out. His carefully constructed world had crumbled, built on a foundation of arrogance and cruelty. Amir stood quietly as the scene unfolded, his expression unreadable. When Dr. Reed approached him, he finally spoke, his voice steady. Thank you for believing in me. Dr. Reed smiled. It wasn't hard. Your talent speaks for itself. The rest of the students erupted into applause, their admiration for Amir palpable. For the first time since he'd arrived, Amir felt like he belonged. He thought of his parents, their sacrifices, and the journey that had brought him here. They had always believed in him, and now, so did he. That night, as Amir sat under the stars, a quiet sense of triumph settled over him. The universe, vast and infinite, felt a little more within reach.